Good morning, friends. Good morning. Yeah, and those who are sitting behind, I request you to come forward. जो पीछे बैठे हुए हैं उनसे आग्रह है कि कृपया आगे का चेयर पहले भर लें. Kindly occupy the front seats. And those who are still outside, kindly come in. Father Louis, kindly bring all of them to the front seat. Send them the front to occupy the front seats. Yeah, that's it. Yes, I request Father Valerian to bring his team to the front seats. Okay. Okay. Dear friends, as we begin the day, I request you to stand up. I will read out the stance statement on truth and justice, and this will be the moment of our prayer and respect for him. And after the statements, we'll pause for a minute to pay homage and also to pray. Why truth has become so bitter? Dissent is so intolerable. Justice so out of reach. Because truth has become very bitter to those in power and position. Dissent so unpalatable to the ruling elite. Justice so out of reach to the powerless, marginalized, and the deprived people. Yet, truth must be spoken. Right to dissent must be upheld. And justice must reach the doorsteps of the poor. I am not a silent spectator. क्यों सत्य इतना कड़वा हो गया है? असहमति इतनी असहिष्णु, न्याय इतनी पहुंच के बाहर, क्यों सत्ता और पद पर बैठे लोगों के लिए? क्योंकि सत्ता और पद पर बैठे हुए लोगों के लिए सच्चाई बहुत कड़वी हो गई है। असहमति सत्तारूढ़ अभिजात वर्ग के लिए इतनी अप्रिय, न्याय शक्तिहीन, हाशिए पर और वंचित लोगों की पहुंच के बाहर हो गई है। फिर भी सच बोलना चाहिए, असहमति के अधिकार का समर्थन करना चाहिए और न्याय गरीबों के दरवाजे तक पहुंचना चाहिए। मैं कोई मूक दर्शक नहीं हूं। Thank you. Kindly be seated. Now I call upon Francis Barras for the recapitulation of the first day. Francis.
Johar. Dear brothers and sisters, we have completed first day of our convention. Now all our deliberations is happening under the theme Save Constitution, Save Democracy and Save Mother Earth. And yesterday, as we look into the entire deliberations, we can see how this theme was touched upon in every session that we had yesterday. Can we move to the next slide? We began the day with remembering architect of Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. We paid homage to him and we remembered him, what the great contribution that he has done for our country. And moving to the next from Ambedkar, we remembered each one of us that we have gathered here together as companions in the Lord. Companions, not only here as Jesuits, but also as fellow companions who are our lay collaborators, our brothers and sisters who are here. And what unites us all together is our call which is deeply rooted in the politics of the gospel, which we also heard in Posa's message and also in all other talks, including Professor Nandini Sundar. There is a gospel task for each one of us. We need to play a very important role. Next. What is that call? A task, a gospel task, to be prophetic. To be prophetic, to rise and raise people. We remembered our martyrs by paying tribute, floral tribute to our martyrs. Next slide. We remembered Stan Swami, Anthony Murmu, A.T. Thomas, Sister Valsa John, Herman Rashe, who all gave their life for Adivasis. And that's where we draw the inspiration to be prophetic in our life. What they did was not only working for the poor, but also they stood by them and gave their life for the poor people. Coming to the message by Posa, yes, he reminded us of today's context. We live in a difficult situations, but yet we cannot be dejected. There is a sign of hope, and we are also in the Easter season reminding us that we are Easter people. And bringing to our knowledge of our own constitution, wherein we need to reimagine in today's context, bringing in the GC 36, that is discernment, collaboration, and networking, which is the most important dynamics for us in today's world. And when we are in difficult times, we need not be dejected. There are 4 pillars of meaning which Posa gave us, very important to remember that we are in social action. Many times we go through frustration, difficulties. But these 4 pillars of meaning gives us hope. That is, there is a belonging, there is purpose, there is storytelling, and there is transcendence. We can find meaning in what we do. Coming to Professor Nandini Sundar, who took the session on faith and justice, an interface in the context of our constitutional ideals. She spoke, first of all, she remembered the contributions of Jesuits, beginning with Father Hoffman, Constant Levens, and all the others, that how Jesuits have made a remarkable contribution in our history of our country. And she says, yes, today we live in a different world altogether, where religion is weaponized. We live in a majoritarian world, and in today's context, what we need is courage. And she uses this phrase, courage is contagious. That is what we need to be today to be prophetic. And she also remembered Father Stan Swami, and also remembered the Gujarat riots, wherein Father Cedric Prakash, who played a very major role, and Father Tom, who worked among the fisherfolk communities, a redemptorist priest, and all others who gave her the courage. Why she mentioned all these people is one aspect that inspired her was to have courage. Courage is contagious. And she spoke on the weaponization of criminal law and went on speaking about the Supreme Court judgments, how it has helped the majoritarian government, and how there is so much of fundamentalism that is increasing today. And yet we cannot give up our hope. That was a message by Professor Nandini Sundar, who says that faith-based organizations who really upheld democracy. And today, in our context, as she remembered the contributions of Jesuits, she said, yes, faith and justice go together. We had a group sharing, very meaningful sharing. All of us went into groups and we came up with our own personal experiences. How faith that does justice from our own personal experiences we shared, which was very touching and meaningful to all of us to listen to. And also we came up with concrete suggestions how we can continue to work in our conferences, provinces, and at individual level to make that faith bring about justice in today's world. And in the evening, we had a very, very moving session that is about our own land here, Jharkhand. Jharkhand stressed with people's resistance movements, a case study of movement against Netahat field firing range. While our friends were sharing, it was really moving. And they were even shedding their tears while they were recalling their experiences of their struggles, these poor people's movements, the struggles that they had to go through. And especially looking at the people's commitments. They were hungry, They were going through pain and suffering, and yet they were all united and they led the fight. And this is the caption that summarizes the people's movements, which made them to hold on to be united, to be strong. We are ready to give our life, but not our land. That was the motto, I could say, kept them going and made them finally to win the battle there. So this is what we could see, wherein we could see the prophetic dimension in yesterday's sessions, how we are called to be prophetic with our call, with a gospel message, which is there deeply rooted in our gospels, and we are called to serve our people. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. Now we shall have the panel discussion and on current scenario, socio-political and economic scenario, and our response. The two panelists today, Professor Jadre and Ms. Kavita Srivastava. So, Father Tom Kaula to chair the session. Therefore, I request them to come to the stage. Father Tom Kaula, kindly lead them. And kindly give a good hand. And I call upon PM Tony to introduce the panelists.
Good morning and welcome back to today's sessions. I'm happy to introduce both Professor Jhandres and Kavita Srivastava. And also we are very grateful to both of them for accepting our invitation to be with us. I don't have any written introduction about Jhandres, but I know that he's our friend and he's part of Jharkhand Janadhikar Mahasabha. Presently he is a professor economics with Ranchi University, and he is there where people are faced with troubles. And I look at his face, look at his eyes, I feel full of hope and joy, and that inspires me. And I see him as good news. This morning we heard the gospel as good news amidst troubles and hardships. So that's what I see Professor Jhandres to be. So there are many more things to talk about him. He has co-authored books with Amartya Sen, and he is known to the whole world as one of the best economists, but he is down to earth also. He is there where people are facing troubles. So we are very happy and blessed to have him with us. And the next person is Kavita Srivastava. She, after many requests, she gave something in written about her. So Kavita is presently the PUCL president of Jaipur, Rajasthan. And she is from the Women's Studies and Development Studies sector, but left academia to become a full-time activist to evolve policy from the grassroots. She worked with the anti-rape and violence against women movement of Rajasthan and was one of the pioneers of the right to food and right to information and right to food campaign with the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan in central Rajasthan. She was one of the founders of the Right to Food campaign in India. She has been associated with PUCL since 1997. She lives in Jaipur and works regionally and nationally. And she has been also, along with the other PUCL friends, trying to take the campaign against the government, because to support the campaign of the BK 16 who have been arrested in BK Bhima Koregaon case. And Professor John Drage also is one of the pioneers of Right to Food campaign, Right to Work, and Right to Information campaign. So once again, hearty welcome, and we are grateful to you. Thank you. Yeah, now we request Father Tom to take us forward.
Good morning to all. You can hear me? So I won't take much time to give another introduction and so on. The procedure today will be that the procedure for this panel discussion will be, first, Professor John Drage will share with us his thoughts for about half an hour. Then 5 to 7 minutes we can have interactions. After that, Professor Kavita Srivastava will have the chance to share for another half an hour. And then again we will have time to interact with her. After the first sharing, that is John Drage's sharing, he will have to leave because he has to catch the train and he has to go to some other place. He is a person, today only he has landed here. Actually, he is, as Tony said, he is a person always on the move from one movement to another. And that way, we are lucky that he is here today. He managed to be with us. So I request Professor John Drage to share your thoughts with us, please.
Thank you very much. It's not very easy to come up with good news these days, but I will try to end with some good news if I can. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. I have a long and intermittent association with many individual Jesuits. One of the first people I met when I came to India many years ago was Father Brylans, who was at that time at the Jesuit house in Jorbagh in Delhi. Soon after that, I met Father Dick Lambert, and then over the years, off and on, I have been associated with many Jesuits, including, of course, Stan Swami, who was a very dear friend. It's a special pleasure to be here with Kavita, because we have been campaigning together for 20 years at least, and it is perhaps not well known that the Right to Food campaign began in her kitchen in Jaipur. Her house was an open house at that time. I think it probably still is an open house. And it's around the kitchen table that we discussed the need for a campaign for the right to food. This was the time when the food stocks were ballooning and there was a lot of starvation in Jharkhand, in Rajasthan. So we felt it couldn't be allowed, and that's how the whole thing began. There were others also, it's not just the two of us. So what I'll try to do is to say something about not what we do or what we have done, but why we do it and what is the thinking behind it. I feel I should talk about democracy, but I think Kavita knows a lot more than me about political democracy, so I'll leave that to her. And also because I frankly don't know more about it than most of you do, I do feel this is the critical problem today. You all know that democracy has been reduced to a bit of a pretense now. If there's no freedom of expression, the opposition parties are not allowed to oppose, there's no real separation of power, and laws like UAPA are being routinized. I think we can conclude, in all fairness, that there's not much democracy left. All I can say about how to respond is that, and I think that has already been said yesterday by Nandini, is that we have to resist more forcefully and courageously. What I find most extraordinary today is not so much the attack on democracy, because that we understand. It's the lack of resistance. I mean, this really, for me, is quite disturbing to see that even people in positions of power and influence who are not at great risk of anything, I'm thinking of lawyers, judges, vice chancellors, editors, what are they doing to stand up against this collapse of democracy? What are they doing to defend the right to freedom of expression and the right to civil liberties and so on? And one partial answer to why there is so little resistance is that resistance has been made risky because repression is so swift and can go quite far. And in that situation, I think we need to be more courageous, as Nandi said, and take inspiration from people like Stand, who said so clearly when he was arrested, I am ready to pay the price. And I think he knew that the price could be his own life. So we have to also be ready to take risks, knowing that even if we take risks, we are still very privileged and very safe. I think you are taking some risks. For example, when you invite us today, you know that it will not help you to be in the good books of the government. So good, let us do more of that. Now, of course, even before the rise of authoritarianism that happened in the last 8 years happened, it's not like democracy was so great in the first place. My friend Ram Guha often describes Indian democracy as 50-50 democracy. You know, like a glass half full and half empty. So what he means by that is that we do have some credible democratic institutions, like we have an electoral system that doesn't work so badly, one person, one vote, more or less working. And then there are other democratic institutions that don't work so well, need to be improved and so on. So we have to try to fill the glass a little more. So that's one way of looking at it. I don't think it's wrong, but I think it misses actually the main point. I think the main point is that it's not 50-50, it's kind of 90-10 in the sense that it's a wonderful democracy for a privileged minority, and it's hardly a democracy for everyone else, except for the right to vote. For people like us who are economically privileged, speak English, the democratic institutions work pretty well, or they worked pretty well until 8 years ago. We could speak really quite freely. We could write in the newspapers. We could defend our rights in court, whether it's the right to civil liberties or the right to property. We could even fight elections. It was quite, you know, in the international perspective, not bad at all. But for the vast majority, these institutions are inaccessible, except once in every 5 years, the right to vote with quite limited understanding of the issues and the different parties and so on. In fact, you can go further, and you can say that some democratic institutions work very well for a privileged minority, and in a diametrically opposite way for the poor, for whom the same institutions become an instrument of oppression. And the best example of that, I think, is the so-called justice system, which is a justice system for some, but for many people it's actually an injustice system that is constantly used against them, to control them, and to prevent them from stepping out of line. I'm thinking of this huge number of under-trial prisoners in the prisons that Stan was working for relentlessly, Stan himself, and the way in so many parts of the country people are silenced by being threatened or actually imposed with court cases. Then they have to go, they can't get bail, they go to prison, they sell their property to pay the lawyers who are also exploiting them. They end up spending years there, and by the time they come out, their lives have been ruined. So I think to talk of a justice system for these people would be wrong. One consequence of this exclusion of the majority, and especially the underprivileged majority, from the institutions of democracy is that these people basically don't count in public policy most of the time. They count a little bit at election time, and that's better than nothing. It's something. If you look at most of the achievements of social policy in India, they have something to do in most cases with electoral politics and the fact that at election time, there's some semblance of effort to do something for people. The rest of the time, they really don't matter very much at all. I think that is the fundamental point to understand about public policy in India. And it's something that has struck me again and again in the last few years. A dramatic example of that is the state of the schooling system. Just 2 days ago, we did a demonstration in Garu against single-teacher schools. I was shocked to discover a few months ago that 30% of schools in Jharkhand are primary schools. 30% of primary schools have a single teacher. You can imagine the quality of education in these schools. Actually, there's no education. A single teacher, even with the best of intention, cannot teach, and it's not like there are very few children in those schools. On average, 50, sometimes 80, 100. I visited one school the other day in Garu, which had 145 children and a single teacher. And the amazing thing is that, now I found this out a few months ago, I should have known it. I found it out, and it's right there on the net, it's official statistics. Anyone can find out. Anyone can raise the alarm, but there's complete silence. It doesn't seem to bother anybody. And that's because these people don't count. The reason why these schools have a single teacher, it's not because there are very few children, as I said, and it's not even because it would be too expensive to post more teachers. It's simply that these children don't count, and so the government feels they can get away with this and save some money. That's the situation. We have seen even more dramatic neglect of poor families and children during the COVID crisis. Schools shut for 2 years. There was no argument for closing the schools for so long. Jharkhand was virtually 2 years continuous, world record, number one. Then during that period, exclusive reliance on online education. Virtually nothing was done for the majority of children who were not able to study online. And then when you reopen the schools, you just promote these children 2 or 3 years ahead without doing anything of any substance to help them to catch up. So at every step, the policy is made for the minority of privileged children. It is the privileged families who insisted on the schools being closed because they were more worried about the health of their children than about education. Their children were studying online at home. They were not having any problems. Then online education, again, was a reflection of the fact that the policy is made for the privileged children. It was basically they were the ones who were able to study online. And when the schools reopened, what the majority of poor children needed was a revision year so they could catch up with the loss, not just the educational loss, but also health, nutrition, psychological damage, everything. But the privileged families would not have allowed that because their children were on track. They don't want to be delayed. So things went back to normal without batting an eyelid. You can give many other examples in many other fields of public policy. And it is because of this extreme marginalization and disempowerment of the underprivileged majority that in the last 20 years we have been campaigning for a number of economic and social rights, like the right to information, the right to work, the right to education, the right to food, more recently the right to health. And the reason it helps is that when people have a legal right, they have something to fight for. It's much easier to demand something when you have a right to it. And the simplest example of that is the right to information. Before the Right to Information Act, most public documents were considered secret. It was virtually impossible to get access to them. And if a poor person asked for even the simplest documents, they would say, it's not accessible to the public. Now they know that they have a right to that information under the Right to Information Act. They exercise that right in large numbers, and quite often it succeeds, not always. All these rights we still have to fight for at every step. But all of them are important, and all of them are worth fighting for. Now, this has been a continuous battle since you were asking for good news. we have actually now, in the last 20 years, I think that 10 important economic and social rights have become a reality that were not there before. Reality in the sense that they are legal rights, but we still have to fight them, of course. The right to information, the right to work under the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the right to food subsidies under the National Food Security Act, the right to childcare in the Anganwadis, the right to midday meals in schools, the right to maternity entitlements under the National Food Security Act that nobody talks about, the Forest Rights Act, the Right to Education Act, the right to social security for unorganized workers, which unfortunately has been very poorly implemented, and now more recently the right to health. So this is, as I said, a set of rights that are really important to protect and fight for. And what we are beginning to see now through this set of rights is the emergence of a semblance of social security system for India. And in fact, by international standards, it's quite, in a way, it's quite advanced. The benefits are very small. It still leaves people in very extreme insecurity. But the benefits can be raised. The point is that once you have a foundation and a structure of rights in place, then you can take things forward over time. And what is interesting about this social security framework is that it is based on citizenship and not on the idea that, not on the fact that the organized working class gains some benefits for itself and then gradually you expand them over time, which is how historically it has tended to happen in many countries. Here, most of the legal rights I've mentioned are universal rights based on citizenship. And I think one reason this is important is that this social security framework can become part of an alternative to the business-driven society that we live in. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's talk about Jharkhand. In Jharkhand, we live in a place where, first of all, like in other states of India, most of the public policies are not made for poor people. They are made under pressure from organized and powerful groups, starting with the business sector. The consequence is that the resources are being plundered by business interests with very little benefit for local people. And when we fight against this, obviously it will help to have some kind of idea of what the alternative is. Is there a better way for Jharkhand? And I think there is. It's staring at us. What is it? I think, first of all, the development of local resources for the benefit of local people. Jharkhand has numerous local resources that could be used for the benefit of local people. Endless. Fish, poultry, any number of forest products, horticulture, bamboo, mahua, tendu, palash, all kinds of things. But they are not being developed for the benefit of local people. One interesting exception happened recently. Mango plantations under the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. You know, somebody has a small amount of land, maybe 1 acre. You pay the initial cost, you help them with some knowledge, inputs. You pay them during the time when they are doing the work. And then after a few years, it's their mango plantation. They can enjoy the fruit, sell them or eat them or whatever. We looked recently at the economic returns to these plantations. I'm just talking of financial returns, not the environmental benefits or the nutrition benefits, just the plain economic returns. How much do you invest? How much do you get later by selling the mangoes? I couldn't believe how high the returns are. What we call the internal rate of return was around 30%. Internal rate of return means if you put money in a bank and the bank gives you 10% per year in real terms after taking into account inflation, that would be an internal rate of return of 10%. Of course, no bank will give you such a high return. No industrial project will give you more than something like 10% rate of return, but this is 30%, okay? And this is just one product. There are numerous products that could be developed in the same way. In Garu, in the last few days, I noticed how everybody at this time is in the jungle picking mahuas. They sell mahua to some local contractor. for 50 rupees a kilo. Meanwhile, there's an interesting person in Goa called Desmond, I don't know if you've heard of him, who produces mahua from the same mahuas. He has a distillery, small plant. He does some good quality control. He has a brand, Desmond, and he sells it on the net at 1,000 rupees a bottle. In Garu, it sells at 50 rupees a bottle. Okay? Now, the sad thing is that Desmond is enjoying the profits. Maybe he's trying to give a fair price to the people, but the people could have their own plant. They could do this on their own, and they would be rich. Jharkhand could be rich in a sustainable and people-friendly way. Point number one. So that is one element of the alternative. Second element of the alternative is quality public services for everyone, starting with schools and health centers. Because when we talk of local resources, we're not talking only about natural resources, we are also talking of human resources. The human resources of Jharkhand, and to a large extent of India as a whole, have been terribly neglected. I mean, this is the biggest resource. And all these children who are studying in single-teacher schools, they are children who could become engineers, doctors, anything. They are capable. All children are capable. But the thing is, some get a chance and some don't. Jaipal Singh Munda would not have become Jaipal Singh Munda if he had not got a chance. Somebody took him under his wing, took him to Oxford, became famous. There are many Jaipal Singh Mundas who didn't become Jaipal Singh Mundas because they didn't get a chance. So human resources, schooling, quality education for all, quality healthcare for all, and then finally, social security. I think that is the alternative. Now, one reason, I think I'll end on this, how much? 5 minutes? Yeah. I'll end on another reason why this whole effort to bring about social security is important, and that is that it can help us to bring about economic democracy. I think this is very important because political democracy will always remain defective without economic democracy. And today we have a very schizophrenic system where one part of our life is democratic, or at least trying to be democratic, that is the political life. And then we have economic life where we tolerate extremely authoritarian institutions where people have to work for a boss and are often badly treated, get a poor wage, harassed, they have to endure health hazards and so on. They often work in conditions that should really not be accepted anymore, and this goes on. And I think that unless we can change that and bring about democracy in the economic life, political democracy will always be defective because the powerful economic interests will always capture the democratic institution. This is what we're seeing all the time in India. Now, I don't have time to go into detail into what I mean by economic democracy, but one element of it, obviously, would be democratic enterprises, where the workers are running the show and not the boss who employs and exploits the workers. Now, you may feel that this is a utopia. Of course, I'm talking long-term here. This is not something we can bring about in a few years, but I'm talking about some kind of long-term alternative. And we actually know, both from theory and from history, that it's possible for workers to run their own enterprises. Maybe not every enterprise, but many enterprises. It's one of the best guarded secrets of economics, that a worker-managed enterprise can be as successful, and in some respects maybe more successful, than a capitalist enterprise. And it's one of the best secrets of history, the discipline of history, that there are many examples of this in history all over the world. For example, you may have heard of the Mondragon cooperative in Spain. It was in fact started, I think, by a priest. I don't know if he was a Jesuit or not, but never mind, it doesn't matter. He was a priest. And this is basically a network of worker-run cooperatives that has been there since 1956, I think, and employs 100,000 workers in different industries, making bicycles, doing software, producing machine tools, very successful. There are many examples around the world of cooperative banks, and the cooperative banks, incidentally, have done much better than the capitalist banks during the financial crisis. There is in Italy a network of cooperatives called La Lega, which has been in existence for more than a century and has 6 million members, almost 10% of the population. There are many farmers' cooperatives around the world. There are some examples in India. For example, India's very own Mondragon, which very few people have heard about, in Kerala, called Uralungal Labor Contract Cooperative Society, ULCCS, which employs, I think, around 6,000 workers, takes big contracts to make buildings and bridges and public infrastructure, has been in existence for quite a long time, I think also more than 100 years. We have examples where this principle was extended to most of the economy, not just some specific enterprises. For example, in 1936 in Spain, after the revolution, where the workers took over all kinds of things, transport, textiles, engineering, all kinds of things. Unfortunately, that didn't last very long because the revolution was crushed. Yugoslavia, for some time, had an economy based on worker-managed enterprises. And we have a very interesting example right in front of us here in Chotanagpur, the Adivasi Society, which is very democratic, including economic democracy. Of course, this is dying to some extent, but even today, if you go, for example, to Khunti, which is a stronghold of the Munda society, you will see not only a certain amount of democracy in social and political life, you will see economic democracy. What I mean is you will see people who live mainly by doing their own work on their own farm or in their own houses, or they work through cooperation. They get together to build a house or to transplant rice. There is very little wage labor. So this exploitative employer-employee relationship is very rarely there. Similarly, you will see very few money lenders. There may be some money lenders who come from outside and exploit the local people. But within the Adivasi society, you will not see any money lenders. And one reason for that is that there's a fairly democratic distribution of the means of production. Everyone has a little bit of land, and so there's a basis for this economic democracy. There would be many more examples if there was more legal, fiscal, financial, and political support for these democratic enterprises. And if we cultivate the spirit of cooperation instead of being obsessed with the competition principle. In fact, we have an obligation, a constitutional obligation, to promote these enterprises and economic democracy. Under Article 39B of the Constitution, which is again a well-guarded secret, and says that the ownership and management of economic resources will be organized in such a way as to benefit people and not profit. So the connection between this and social security is that when people have some social security, they are not vulnerable and dependent. They will be more able to demand working in democratic enterprises and resist, they'll be more able to resist exploitative economic relationships. So I think this is something that we need to think about a lot more. It's not for today or tomorrow, or even day after. It's sometime down the line. But I think it's important to know that we have an alternative, and we are not barking in the wilderness when we oppose the existing system. Thank you.
So we shall thank John Dress for the input, the way he described the possibilities of an alternative. The topic was the the present socio-political economic situation in our country. And as an economist and an activist, he has tried to present before us the things that all of you would have seen as very ordinary, but as he said, left unnoticed, not taken into action or seen as a possibility. So that is what he was trying to say, that the biggest crisis is that lack of resistance or lack of taking or observing what is happening and responding to that. Then he was giving us examples of all that is happening. So now we have 5 to 7 minutes for you. Any of you like to ask some questions, some clarifications, and observation? So you are welcome. Yeah, yes, Father.
Thank you very much at the onset. But we are living in a very selfish world today. So when we are talking about economic democracy, even the people who we are working with, when we talk in terms of economic democracy, how do we convince them? Because each one wants their pound of flesh, rather. So how do we convince these people to come together for economic democracy? Thank you.
You want to respond to that immediately? Yeah, any one or two more questions, then he can answer to us, so we will save some time. Anybody else? Some question? Yes, Father. The Father P.A. Chaco.
Professor, you are familiar with many NGOs all over India, particularly in Jharkhand. May I know your view about in the present day scenario, should the NGOs or organizations that work with people, should they reinvent themselves in the present day scenario, in their approach?
Thank you, Chaco. Here, Father Jacob.
You are proposing political democracy, and you gave an example of OD area. Whether it is possible in other tribal areas also. And we know that democracy means capitalism. In this context, how to find out ways and means for political, for economic democracy.
Thank you, Jacob. Any one more question, then we can ask. Yes, Father.
Earlier, village economy was our main source of income. Village economy, like small-scale industries and like that. So today all those things are dying, and people are also starving because of their livelihood is lacking. And is there any possibility of bringing them back and make the villages sustainable?
Yeah, I think we shall try to respond to these, and then if you have time, we shall see how much was. So, Professor, shall we try? Yeah. Can you go there? Or?
Okay. So, you said we live in a selfish world. I think there's some truth in that, but that is partly because we live in this business-driven society where profit is driving everything, and where only competition is valued, not cooperation, and everyone is struggling to survive. And one of the many advantages of enterprises that would be in the hands of workers would be, I mean, there are many advantages. One is that it would be a more democratic way of functioning, so that would have a value in itself. It would reduce the economic inequalities because there would be no boss who gets all the profits. The revenue would be shared in some fashion between the workers. It would be more friendly to the environment because the environment is where the people live. The workers are there, so they will be more careful in spoiling the environment. And I think also it will change the values, because people will be liberated a little bit from this whole system driven by profits. So, you know, you're saying the selfish world, it's true, but I don't think people are necessarily selfish. I think people are what they become through their experience and the environment in which they live. They can be very selfish, no doubt. They can be cruel, and they can also be very kind and very cooperative. So that's why I said that we have to foster the cooperative spirit if you want to achieve economic democracy. Now, none of this tells us, you know, how it's going to happen. I think it will take some struggle. I mean, obviously the capitalists are not going to give up without a fight. So I don't know exactly how it will happen, but what I said is that if the workers have some sort of security, then they'll be better able to demand some kind of change, and then hopefully we'll see some progress of the democratic economic institutions, especially if they are also supported by the state through fiscal policies and maybe subsidies and, of course, political support. So I don't have a formula about how we get there. What I'm saying is there's somewhere we can try to get and try to fight for it. I don't have much to say about NGOs and how they can reinvent themselves. I mean, the NGOs, of course, many of them are doing good work. Some of them are a bit corrupt. I think the main problem of NGOs is that they don't easily get involved in any kind of adversarial work, because especially today when they're so closely watched and controlled and at the mercy of the state. So they can do a lot of good work. For example, when you talk of developing these local resources in Jharkhand, the NGOs can help a great deal, and some of them have helped a great deal. But political work, of course, they are not able to do, and I don't think that's going to be possible in the near future. So I would like to think they can reinvent themselves, but I'm not very sure how they can reinvent themselves. There was a question I didn't fully understand about tribal areas. Democracy. Yeah. I think it's not only possible. That's where the example comes from. You know, Jaipal Singh Munda said very clearly in his first speech in the Constituent Assembly, you cannot teach democracy to the tribals. You have to learn democracy from them. They are the most democratic people on earth. I think that's very true. And I think he was not just thinking of the democratic institutions like the Gram Sabhas and so on, which are very important, but I think he was also thinking of the democratic values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And without getting romantic about it, I think we can say that the Adivasi society has practiced these values much more than we have. This is something that Stan was very conscious of, and he had great admiration for the Adivasi society. The best thing you can do if you want to learn about Stan, I think, is to watch his interview with, who is it, Tapan Bose, on YouTube. It's a wonderful 20-minute interview. So he talks about these Adivasi values. So I think the job is not so much to bring democracy to the Adivasis, it's to learn it from them and to extend these values to the mainstream, if possible. That would be great. It's, again, nothing that will happen in a hurry, but it's something we can try to do. Somebody said something about the dying village economy and livelihood and whether we can revive. Yes, we can revive. I think we can revive at least some of the village-based activities, and we can create new ones. We don't necessarily have to hang on to what was there before. We can create new forms of livelihood as long as they are sustainable and participatory and so on. So that I think we can do. I don't know if it means making the village self-sufficient. I am not sure that's necessary. I think there can be some economic exchange between villages. I mean, as long, again, as it's in a relatively democratic and equitable framework.
Lund's challenge to us is that we need to change our value systems. The value systems that are given to us by the market and the media, we have to unwind it and then look for possibilities. The 80s we used to say, another world is possible. Today he is trying to tell us that another world is possible. One more question from any, one more. Clement there. No, wait, Clement. We give a chance for Father Benny.
Sir, I am coming from Sri Lanka. With a Sri Lankan background, I am asking this question. This political democracy in Sri Lanka, the constitution itself against the democracy. Because it's not secular constitution. It's a single Buddhist-based constitution. And also the economic democracy, even though Rajapaksa families is not in power, they are controlling the government. So the Rajapaksa family's regime, there is a family democracy, not the people's democracy. In this context, how organizations like us, like the church-based organizations, civil society organizations, can respond to some insights?
You want to? From here you can respond.
Yeah. I don't know enough about Sri Lanka to give any advice to someone from Sri Lanka. I think that whether it's Sri Lanka or India, there are still very serious deficiencies even in the framework of political democracy. That's true in India also. For example, this first past the post electoral system, I think is very undemocratic and particularly unfair to the minorities. It makes it very difficult for them to get a voice and to have a say. So I think that even in India, the constitution, I mean, actually it's not part of the constitution because in principle, you could have a different electoral system within the constitution. But there are obviously these limitations. So we have to also, I mean, aside from trying to bring about more democracy in the economy, we have to also try to push the boundaries of political democracy. And first of all, save whatever we still have today. And I'm hoping that Kavita will talk more about that.
Yeah, I think we need to wind up, but Clement is standing there with a phone, so a grace mark to Clement, please.
Okay. If I understood rightly, you said extreme marginalization is taking place, and it's because of that maybe tribals may not progress much. But there is plenty of opportunity, as you yourself have taken so much of step, and then with regard to right to food, work, and all those things you have done. But with regard to education and with regard to health, poor people are not able to access the health services. And even the extreme corner of the villages, many people. In my side, we have lots of suburb people. They are not, education is not accessible to them. Now, what to do in such cases?
No, I think you are absolutely right. So we have a right to education, which actually has many interesting provisions. I mean, it's known mainly for one or two provisions, like the 25% quota for poor families in private institutions, but there's a lot more to the right to education. Many provisions that could have, I think, been developed and used to improve the education system. But unfortunately, it hasn't really been taken up as a political agenda. And one thing I found very striking, both in Garu this week and earlier in some similar work we had done at the time of COVID in Latya district, is that on their own, people don't protest against the state of the schooling system. I mean, they have these dysfunctional schools in front of them all the time. They're very unhappy. They want something better. But somehow they don't organize by themselves to demand better education. But if there's a catalyst, if you explain to them what is the right education, if you tell them that it's possible to come on the streets, then somehow everyone comes out. You know, in Garu, in spite of the mahua season and most people being in the jungle picking mahuas, huge numbers came on the street. So it's an issue that's waiting to be used for public mobilization. Health, I think, is a little bit different in the sense that I think for health there's a little bit more pressure for the system to improve, because see, the problem in the school is that if the teacher doesn't do anything, then the children are powerless, and so it goes on and on. Even the parents are largely powerless. In a health center, it's not quite like that, because the patients, they need attention and they demand attention. And so if you put certain facilities in place, there's a good chance that they will actually be used. And we have seen some progress, some positive change, I think, in the healthcare system in the last few years, including during the COVID. But again, as a political issue, somehow health hasn't happened, in fact, it's so striking in Rajasthan. Kavita will talk more about this. But it's so amazing to see that you can't get more than a few people on the street to demand the right to health. But when the medical community gets upset by one provision of the act, they are on the street in thousands, making huge racket to demand the entire act to be withdrawn. Yeah, so it's again this asymmetry between the disempowered majority and a privileged minority. But health, again, I do feel that there is something that can become a political issue and has become a political issue in some states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu. So we have to try to bring about a similar situation elsewhere. It's not going to happen in a hurry, but there's no other way. Thank you so much. I enjoyed the occasion. I apologize for leaving early, but I have to catch the train, so I'll have to go. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just one minute. We'll have a few words of thanks from Father Cecile.
Yeah. Professor Jadra has another commitment, so he is about to leave. Therefore, we have a time to thank him and sincerely thank him for bringing us all this socio-political and economic scenario of our state here, our country, and pose the challenges to work for faith and justice. Therefore, again, thank you very much. In order to thank and pay respect to Professor Jadre, I invite Father Jerry Coutinho to give us all and honor him. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And over to the chairperson.
So, once again, thank you, John Dres. Yeah. We shall continue. Now we have Kavita Srivastava with us. All us first waiting to listen to her. Kavita ji, please come to the.
Yeah, so friends, I'm not going to give a kind of seamless lecture. It's going to be in small parts because the situation of our country today, it's not easy at all, you know, to describe it in sort of one framework or, you know, just with kind of a few examples. So since the topic was very general, you know, to be responding to the socio-economic and political scenario, I have decided to focus on Hindutva majoritarianism and the judiciary, you know, because our role really comes in save constitution, save democracy. I would like to correct it. Let's call it save constitutional democracy, which I'm going to talk about later. So first, let me give a small scenario because, see, nobody today has the answers. And the answers lies collectively with all of us putting our heads together. I'd like to describe two situations and would like to understand with you how do we analyze it. Recently, 5 eminent Muslim personalities led by former Chief Election Commissioner Mr. Qureshi, along with Professor and Vice Chancellor AMU, General Zamiruddin Shah, Najib Jung, Shahid Siddiqui, a journalist, and others, went to meet the RSS chief. See, all of you, I'm not going to be talking about the context. I just want to illustrate first, because everybody knows the context. Went to meet the RSS chief because today, actually the Muslim vote does not matter at all. The Muslims were a very active political community who wanted to be in the power structure of this country, and all the Muslims who stayed back in India post-partition chose India because they saw their future, they saw their hopes, dreams, aspirations in this India. But today they don't matter, their lives don't matter, their vote does not matter, their views don't matter. We have relegated them into a second or third grade citizen. Please remember, their economic situation may be better than an Adivasi and a Dalit, but the situation of individual Muslims is so distressing. They've actually accepted this. One woman told me, a working class woman, save our lives. We don't mind being third grade citizens in this country, but don't kill us. Now, maybe with this kind of sentiment, having lost everything, these 5 men went to meet the RSS chief. You're going to meet, the person who's running the circus, and told that what if we give back to the Hindus Gyan Vapi Masjid and Krishna Janmabhoomi Mathura and Gyan Vapi in Varanasi. Will the lives of Muslims be saved? Will the killings not happen? They didn't go even to ask for, will we be equal then? Mohan Bhagwat, the RSS chief, told them, go back. I don't know exactly what transpired, but now future conversations will happen with the Delhi RSS, which is in Jhandewala. Father Denzel knows. So they returned, and this Muslim, the 5 people who nobody gave them the role to represent Muslims, started negotiations and take along all the prominent Muslim organizations like the Jamaat-e-Islami Hind, Jamaat-e-Ulema Hind, and all other idaras of the Muslims, and they started dialogue. Now see the desperate situation that the Muslims find themselves in, but is this the answer? That you start a dialogue with RSS. If you started a dialogue with, we know the kind of Prime Minister and Home Minister we have in the government of India. If you start, at least you're dialoguing with some constitutional position holders, whatever they be, whatever their past be. But to start a dialogue with RSS, this is something that we need to analyze. Similarly, we need to analyze what is the message that the Prime Minister tried to give out on Easter when he went to Sacred Heart Cathedral in Delhi. Did he, from that podium, say that I've come to tell you on this holy day, a day which teaches us that lives cannot be shut in tombs. People will rise from the grave, rise, as you all just showed us. And therefore, I want to tell the Christian community, this country is as much as yours as any others. And this is your opportunity to rise. No, he didn't say that. He didn't give a message to the Sangh Cabal last person that don't touch the Christian community people, don't touch the churches. He didn't. It was just a small PR exercise. That's my analysis that he went for. We all need to accept, and you too should, that we are living in times of majoritarianism, Hindutva. It may not be my Hindu. I was born in, I still live in a Hindu family. I may not be a practicing Hindu, but my cultural self definitely is through those cultural mores of being Hindu in the household I grew up. And we know that the Hindutva majoritarianism is rooted. This context, friends, that we need to talk about democracy. Let's not, try to live in an illusion that we are living in the same India. The part I come from, maybe Eastern India may be slightly better, but the north of India, from where I come from, Rajasthan, Haryana, Delhi, and there's just no outcry. There's just no mobilization that's happening across the board. And we all know it, that if it is the Muslim first, it's the Muslim, the Christian, the dissenters, all are standing in one line. Who bites the dust first, we don't know. But it will be, each one of us biting the dust. If we don't understand what we have to do today. Why am I saying we are at the edge of genocide? Because recently in Rajasthan, till now you had lynchings. In Jharkhand there were several lynchings of Muslims, such a minority population of Muslims, but you had several lynchings. Similarly in Rajasthan, we had several lynchings in the name of the cow. Lynching is the act when you put fear in the minds of the people that, don't you dare mess up with our cows. I mean, there's nothing like blasphemy in any form of Hindu religion, but cow has now become that blasphemous symbol. So don't you dare touch the cow. But now it has moved beyond that. Now it is, you don't have a right to live. And not just that, there's so much of state sponsorship and protection about it, that in Rajasthan, 2 boys were picked up from the border of Haryana. There's a cultural region called Mewat, which chose not to go to Pakistan. The Muslims of that region chose not to go to Pakistan. They fought the Mughals, they fought the British, and in independent India, which they made their home, they now have to fight to survive. 2 boys are picked up. By whom? There is a force in Haryana called the Special Cow Protection Task Force. Don't think you will not have it tomorrow here. Don't think that you are protected. So the Special Cow Protection Task Force, which works closely with the police and they, hand in hand, they've been legitimized into police officers, like your SPOs in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand. And they picked up 2 boys whom they suspected were part of, smuggling cows, but they found nothing. They had no pickup, they had nothing. They beat them up so much that they were virtually dead. By the time they were produced in a police station, the police knew that the custodial death would come on them, the responsibility of their death. So decided not to take them and did not take them to the hospital. And of course, after that, these boys are taken far away, about 400 kilometers from where they were picked up. And we don't know whether they were dead by then. They were strapped to their seatbelts and burnt alive. And after that, okay, these murders, gruesome murders keep happening. Women's bodies chopped off, etc. But after that, at least the police chases and the accused are caught. Between Haryana and Rajasthan, Haryana had panchayats in every village saying that we will not allow Rajasthan police to enter our areas and no culprit, no accused need to surrender. And right to the top level, Haryana government has given these instructions, don't cooperate with Rajasthan police. So it's like as if we are India, Pakistan, Haryana and Rajasthan, we have a continuous border over several regions, but Haryana is an enemy state that Rajasthan police can't even go and arrest. Now this is the kind of impunity that so-called cow protectors, after doing a killing like this, have that they cannot be arrested. And 2 were arrested day before yesterday. They were found in other BJP rule states, giving protection. So friends, the scenario is getting grimmer and grimmer. And therefore, I now say that it's not lynching anymore to, set an example. It is genocide. And one community is, when I say on the edge, people say, no, it has started. You decide whether you want to call it on the edge or it has started. But definitely, majoritarianism is at its peak. So what is it? Why do I want to talk to you about constitutional democracy? And not mere democracy. And I think we all need to be clear on this point that when I say majoritarianism, what does it mean? It means a very large section of Hindus, along with Jains, along with maybe a small section of Sikhs, maybe a section of Buddhists, I don't know, but definitely a large number of Jains, have a consensus that India needs to become a Hindu Rashtra. If I put up a board, Khalistan Rashtra, I'll be arrested. If I put up a board, Islamic Rashtra, I will be arrested. But if I put up banners, Hindu Rashtra, it doesn't make a difference. It's normalized. It's normal. So there is a massive consensus, and that is what majoritarianism is. There is this feeling of, a feeling of being glorious, that there is a Hindu ruler after 1,000 years. I thought this was all rubbish. I thought this is the BJP narrative. No, people do say it, even Mazdoors say it. When we do our meetings with Mazdoors, the day when petrol prices in Jaipur reached 112, we told them, what do you have to say to this? And they said, don't you dare criticize Modi. Even if the petrol prices go up to rupees 500, we are not going to question him, because after 1,000 years, we are being ruled by a Hindu. This is a Mazdoor who has everything to lose in a Hindu Rashtra. Let's call it Hindu supremacists. Let's call it Brahminical supremacy. Which kind of Hinduism? Is it a Dalit who's going to rule? Is it a tribal whom they keep Hinduizing going to rule? No. It is Brahminical supremacy. Please remember, I'm being, I don't know, Father Anthony may say, just shut up, Kavita, and leave this room. You're causing trouble. But if we don't begin talking about it, and like Father Stan said, pay a price for it. Why are we just holding on to this silence? Do you think we will save our schools? I went to a Christian school. My primary education was in Christian school, and that has been so important for me, for what I became later. Do you think we can save our schools? Do you think those NCERT textbooks that are going to come, what are you going to teach from those textbooks? What is it that you're going to teach? Tomorrow you will be teaching about Gandhi's killers, Gandhi, I didn't even know this distinction. Again, I want to come to constitutional democracy. There are 2 terms in Hindi, Gandhi Hatya and Gandhi Vad. Vad is like a sacrifice that you have to do. You have to kill for evil to finish. And Hatya is murder. So one is a sacrificial killing and one is murder. You know what the RSS writes? They call it Gandhi Vad. It was important to kill Gandhi for the Hindus to survive. Otherwise, Muslim supremacy was what Gandhi was bringing. Islamic supremacy, by asking Muslims not to leave the country. So you should realize that your schools, we are sitting with some of the premier institutions next door, I'm in full admiration of the institution of Xavier's, of the Jesuits. However, if there is no protest, simply because we are too few, We may have all kind of, yes, be prepared, whoever speaks out, be prepared for ED, for the Enforcement Directorate, for the IT, the Income Tax Department, for the CBI, to raid you, to investigate you. Be prepared for a UAPA if you are in a tribal region, or if you're Muslim. Be prepared for, or if you're a dissenter. Please be prepared for some of these things. But I think there is still an opportune time where we need to open our mouths. So let me get to why I feel mere democracy is not what we need to state. We need to say constitutional democracy, because constitutional democracy is the question that we have to develop. Because our democracy rests on the Constitution, and you know it, you know quite well, that a 700-page Constitution has been developed by those people who call them, who want a Hindu Rashtra. I don't know, but it seems they've developed a 700-page Constitution. And till now, we used to laugh. They are fringe. But how mainstream, how they are the center. So let's not laugh, you know, about it. Though I still feel absolutely, you know, I find it so ridiculous. I want to talk about 2-3 things. There is a kind of, in a very planned way, there is what should I say? In a very conspiratorial, planned, orchestrated way, the Indian Constitution is being attacked by those in constitutional positions. The Vice President of India, because he was a local from my own city, Mr. Jagdeep Dhankar, and I can talk to him, or, you know, look straight into his eye and tell him that you know what you're talking is absolutely rubbish. He, the Law Minister Kiran Rijiju, they said, Kiran Rijiju is continuously saying that the judiciary, the selection of judges by the judicial colloquium should have members of the executive in it. That means some people from the government. It is a very bad system, colloquium. The colloquium, judges colloquium, however, whatever it is independent. However bad it be, yet there is some strength in it. But today, they're desperate to enter for the selection of judges. Even that little room they cannot give. And then, Jagdeep Dhankar, the Vice President of India, says that we would like to change the Constitution. And there is a ruling of about 50 years old in the Keshavanand Bharti case, which said that the structure of the Constitution cannot change. And what is the Constitution? The preamble of the Constitution. That is at the core. And they said that this structure of the Constitution cannot be changed. And the Parliament has no right to tamper with it. Now, what does Mr. Jagdeep Dhankar say? They say that a Parliament is free to alter the Constitution as it deems fit according to its wisdom. And don't agree with the basic structure of the Constitution. They say that the basic structure of the Constitution is going against the people's will because the Parliament is sovereign. Friends, in our kind of democracy, the Parliament is not sovereign. The Parliament, the judiciary, they're all at par. So each one has a certain role. Yes, the Parliament makes law, but the Parliament also has to see what the judiciary has to say. And they are out to change the basic structure. Should we not defend the basic structure? Our freedom struggle, yes, was a struggle against imperialism. But more importantly, it was also the kind of nation we wanted to become, the kind of principles on which we wanted to be governed. It was a reform towards an equal India. equality. I mean, we didn't get equality, liberty, fraternity just like that. We didn't just get these principles out of the hat. It was our freedom struggle which led Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to conceptualize it in this way. After all, there was a Constituent Assembly. He placed a draft in the Constituent Assembly. If the large numbers of people in the Constituent Assembly did not agree with him, we would have got a different constitution. After all, he had only put a draft. But it got the consensus of the entire Constituent Assembly because everybody wanted in India, and I want to very quickly go through our preamble as it was outlined on 26 November 1946. You may have heard it 100 times, but we've got to say it 200 times. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. What is at complete stake is fraternity. We couldn't care about brotherhood. We just couldn't care about people of another religion. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. So this was the basic insight. This was the essence of our freedom struggle. We have to decide whether and the Supreme Court enshrined it in its Keshavanand Bharti judgment, where it said that the basic structure of the Indian Constitution emanates from its preamble and needs to be protected. And therefore, no power ought to be changing this basic structure. For 75 years, everything was going well. Imagine if this is sacrificed at the altar of majoritarianism. Majoritarianism diktat would be absolutely in reverse gear of what our freedom struggle was meant to be, which we 75 years ago. This is the Amrit Kal. The Amrit Kal, the Amrit Mahotsav is to bring a Hindu Rashtra. Do we realize that 75 years later, we are told, let's bring a Hindu Rashtra? Is that the Amrit Kal that we are looking towards? Somebody has to be talking about it, and we all need to be talking about it. Something else that I wish to add, and this is quite important, that, I mean, we have to decide.
Another 5 minutes more?
Yeah. So you have to decide, because dictators always come through democracy, and therefore I keep clarifying constitutional democracy, that dictators cannot undo a constitutional democracy. And ours was not just a the constitutional democracy was supposed to bring social, economic, and political equality. So imagine if we're going to be in a situation where we're going to bring back caste, we're going to bring back supremacy of a certain religion, we're going to get divisive. Imagine, that's the kind of India we are headed towards. So very quickly we need to take a decision that I mean, of course, as Jean said, we were a democracy with just a half a glass full. But we could aspire that glass to be completely full. Yes, we were fighting with few tools. As a human rights worker, we have reached a situation where today even our most important tool, called the fact-finding, is under attack. There is a case in the Delhi High Court which says, Father Denzel and others must be quite familiar with it. There's a case which says that fact-finding should be declared illegal. And moment a matter is seized with the court, there should be no fact-finding. Now imagine, my right to inquiry is being questioned. My right to know is being questioned because no alternative narrative is being, do they want to allow? Now, so you have to decide, you need to decide that whether we're going to sacrifice our right to know, our right to inquiry, our right to investigate. Yes, there is a police investigation, but the people's initiatives need to be killed completely. And therefore, we will never be able to defend we've reached the point where this democracy has become a bulldozer democracy. Again, I'm talking of what may be coming to Jharkhand. I don't know whether the bulldozer use has reached Jharkhand, but it's very prevalent in the states of UP, in the states of Madhya Pradesh. It's also crept into Rajasthan, Haryana, where the executive, and the executive is like some municipal corporation department head, not even the commissioner, who can just take a decision that let me just demolish this house. And they take a bulldozer and just go and demolish house, convert demolition of mosques. At this point of time, the large number of mosques that are being demolished, mosques becoming temples. You know, that's the kind of exercise that is happening. So friends, while we've got to fight tooth and nail, and I want to give just two examples of how to fight it. Aruna Roy was suggesting that we should actually form a human chain in defense of the Constitution, in defense of constitutional democracy, in defense of the basic structure of the Constitution. Form a human chain, and it should just be an endless human chain. It should be a sea of humanity. Let's decide upon a day, even if it takes a year for us to plan it. You know, things are only going to deteriorate, but that is something, that's one way of showing, because we are not coming out in large numbers, but if we say, let's form a human chain, maybe even those who are sitting on the fence, who have a lot of fear, may come out. Secondly, we've got to become the voice of people. We have to break our silence. This group sitting here, and all of you have a legacy in Jharkhand, you know, who really resisted, fought imperialists. Y'all have that legacy, and fought injustice. So we've got to become, as Dr. Ambedkar said, the Mook Nayak. You know, we've got to become the voice of those who still have not broken the silence. And third, friends, I cannot leave this place without telling you that while we have to keep struggling, 5 years Bhima Koregaon, and remember friends, we are becoming one of the most surveilled country. What does Father Stan's case teach us? When Netwire was penetrated into his computer, we have the Arsenal report. No court as yet is willing to hear it. The matters are in court. But that, now you can say that Netwire is too outdated, because that was like 5-6 years ago. They started putting Netwire in 2016 in the computers of Father Stan and others of BK. But today, the recent, please discuss that report in one of your meetings, do it online, or when we do it online, we'll send a message to you. The status of police in India report that came out last week tells us, the third report done by Common Cause tells us that we are one of the most surveilled countries, and we as a nation feel what the government does is right. And therefore, most of the people did not have a problem with Pegasus, with other surveillance techniques. They did have a problem with their bank accounts being talked about, with their money and income being talked about. But they didn't have a problem if most of Indians are surveilled because they think government does right. Because when we became a nation, we thought we brought in our own government. So we have to learn, people have to learn to distinguish and understand that government does not just wrong, hell of a wrong, and is out to subvert the whole country. So friends, y'all talked about justice. You will only do justice to your lives. And I will only do justice to my life if I speak out today and prevent any further deterioration of what already we are facing as a nation. Thank you.
Kavita has given us a good scenario of what is happening in the name of this majoritarian communalism or this Hindu Rashtra that the country is moving towards, and the consequences of it with many examples, and then putting before us a number of challenges. Now, we shall later, after this, we will be having group level discussions on it, further reflecting what we can do and so on. But as an interaction, one or two questions I would invite before we disperse. Please, I am seeing many hands. Yeah, we will take the questions and then we will try to answer. Yes, Alex.
Friends, yesterday I was not here in the afternoon for the session. I had to chair one, I did not. Tom sent me to one place where Sajha Manch was having Ambedkar Jayanti program. And there were Buddhists, there were Muslims, there were Hindus, I was the only Christian. And there also we were discussing, Kavita, the things that you said here. It was said that Congress had diluted the Indian Constitution so much by amendments. The present government is trying to do away with it. It was true. Now, something was said, I want to check with you, that in all RSS, BJP offices, there is a portrait, a photograph of Bhimrao Ambedkar. This is the latest tactics of theirs, that the photograph or the portrait with whatever we have are found in all RSS and BJP offices and so on. I was mesmerized to hear this. How much do you know, if there is anything? I have a feeling that they would say, look, we up here, we revere him, he's with us, and the 7th constitution which they have developed, they'll say, hear what he said. They will try to interpret things that way. I have a very simple kind of understanding. Maybe you can throw some light on that if you can.
Thank you, Alex. We look at, yes, Benny, then for Francis, no?
Sri Lanka. While you were talking, I was reflecting Sri Lankan context too. Here is Hindu, RSS, Hindutva, Brahmanical supremacy. In Sri Lanka, it's a Buddhist supremacy. Here, it's RSS, and in Sri Lanka, we have Buddhist monks wing. And what is happening in India, this Hindutva majorityism affects Sri Lanka badly. And the BJP leaders, RSS leaders periodically come there and disturb the Tamil communities there to build up among the Tamil communities these Hindutva ideas. And my question is not based on Sri Lankan context, in Indian context itself. I have been coming here for the past 10 years or 15 years to participate in this social action meeting and the convention. Every time we speak about the present challenges in the past. So about the Brahmanical supremacy, Hindutva majoritism and all we speak. I'm looking forward the way forward. Otherwise, we speak about the past and the current challenges. You proposed to become the voice of the voiceless. Then another one is this example of Arun Roy, something like that. I am looking for a concrete way forward in this for us. For an example like Catholic institution, Christian institution, educational institution, come together at least to have a 1 or 2 days protest recommendation may help us. May not be this question only for you. This is the question that I propose to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benny. One more question we will take, then we will ask Kavita ji to answer. Yes, Francis.
Thank you for your presentation. Now, given the situation, we've been ruled by Muslims for 700-800 years, and there was, relatively no problem. Ruled by the British, and relatively there were problems, but then we are facing right now a problem within the country. And given the minority people that we are, politically, it is difficult for us to fight. Now, in line with what our friend from Sri Lanka said, what discourse do we need to take? There are very good people in the country. What discourse do we take that brings in harmony, justice, liberty, and equality in our country? Thank you.
One more question we will take and we will finish. Yes, Ranjit?
Yes, Father. RSS is an organization, but it is not yet registered.
Yeah, please. Yeah, that will be better.
Actually, it's in our question and answers that we find more depth. And I actually don't mind, but you all are a very disciplined organization. You have time to break for tea, and you have time for do this, and we are like very indisciplined, you know. There's something to learn from you, and maybe you have something to learn from us. I think all the three questions are actually talking about the same, and the fourth one was slightly different. When I said protect the basic structure of the Constitution, that is the most concrete suggestion that I have given. That in our discourse, we need to bring in constitutional democracy, and we need to say we have to protect the basic structure of the Constitution. We have to say it in these terms. We all have to do the reading of Keshavan and Bharati. We need to understand what was said 48, 50 years ago. And we need to give a kind of positive message. And when we, whether we read the new textbooks or whatever, when the attacks happen on a minority or an Adivasi, we've got to strengthen our arguments by using, by questioning that institution which has been dismantled, which has been co-opted and subverted to become now the institution of the Hindu Rashtra. Without changing a line or a word, each institution is becoming an institution of the Hindu Rashtra. The making of the Hindu Rashtra, and then of course, the perpetuation of the Hindu Rashtra. So you have to question, obviously. When I said become a Mook Nayak is, you will decide the form of becoming a Mook Nayak. Do you want to be on social media? Like how our friend Meena Kotwal is this young journalist who worked in the BBC. After having done her few years stint as a very young journalist, decided in the 100th year of the Mook Nayak, which Dr. Ambedkar had started, in the 100th year, they restarted Mook Nayak and has become one of the most active web portal, and you can find every kind of atrocity. And what did Meena tell us? Meena said, while we have to fight the larger battle of protecting the Indian Constitution, of protecting the Indian judiciary, because we cannot survive without justice. However, we have to keep doing this other work that we need to do, that Jean talked of. We have to keep doing our right to food and, our economic equality, illustration, fighting the atrocities. And world, it's the digital media that the young people are extremely attracted to. It's the visual media and the digital media. So the Mook Nayak, the protest, an active voice of protest is on the web portal, and we are seeing that now the government of India is bringing in the harshest laws to control all these OTT platforms. And when the BBC documentary on the 2002 Gujarat, 20 years since Gujarat, a chief minister becomes prime minister, and to show us that they did not ban the BBC film. They only asked Twitter and YouTube to remove it. All other portals, we screened it. We did 2 screenings in our office. Meghnad ji is sitting here, board certification. But private screening, you can do it. The only thing that you cannot watch on your mobile is child pornography. You can watch everything else. They cannot stop you from watching a BBC film, which goes against your prime minister. So it's of Roth, that's what he's called them. Ram Navami, Hanuman Jayanti. We've seen it. So the book has become his mode of putting it together. For us, a meeting, it could be. And I feel very strongly that our form of protest will get larger outside if we begin discussing in small groups, openly. The strategies have to emerge when we start in small groups. In this very state, Meghna ji and others were telling me how with Father Stan and others started a kind of underground group during the emergency. I mean, you call it underground, overground, or regularity in discussions that was needed. To keep our own selves going, we need to be talking, speaking, understanding. So your form of protest, I cannot tell you what form of protest, but use all forms of protest. Decide on, and democratic forms and non-violent forms. Democratic, non-violent forms of protest, this is a non-negotiable. No violent means are we going to take on. Even violent means for self-defense has to be argued against. We've got to argue against it because this is precisely what the Indian state wants. It's so easy for them to say that, we want to get into violence, the slightest little aberration. So we have to use all forms. I mean, it'll all depend on what is the group that is doing the resistance. There can be no formulae about it. So it could just simply be a play. It could be anything. And remember, even your streets are today not being allowed to plays, You try doing a play in the streets of Ahmedabad, anywhere in Gujarat. You're just not allowed. In the Gandhi Peace Foundation in Delhi, you cannot do a meeting on the bulldozer. That meeting was called off. And many other meetings have been called off. You cannot do internal meetings these days. Internal meetings required no permission. You could do hall. What I meant was internal hall meetings. When you get out, you need to take permission. But today the police is actually entering into your halls. Father Denzel knows it better than all of us. He has suffered the Delhi police, which is one of the most aggressive police. He being interrogated because ISI, it was the duty of ISI to give its hall to anybody who paid for it, and they don't enter into the content part of it. So what they're now interrupting our spaces, our internal spaces. They are interrupting, So, but there are cracks in the wall. We have to continuously widen those cracks. I mean, that is the beauty of being born human. That is the beauty of taking on a challenge. Who else will take on the challenge? Loya said, Zinda Kaume 5 saal in people who are living people. Don't wait for 5 years. We are living people. We can definitely see a crack and rise, but there can be no single formula. And the concrete examples will have to come through your own meetings, your own preparedness, your own context. And India is too huge to have any single formula. The Sakal Bharat Samaj has done 50 hate rallies, land jihad, and love jihad. I mean, the Muslim is such a monster that in Maharashtra and rest of India, they want to take over land. Economic betterment of Muslims is causing a lot of problem. Or love jihad. I mean, love is something that is my personal right. Even my parents don't have a right to interfere with whom I love. But there is one space where I can go at the end of the day. Where is it that I can go? Yes, it's the judiciary may also betray us, but it's the people of India whom I will be with and say that we have to raise this voice. So there cannot be one single formula, but we have to at least start. We cannot postpone it for tomorrow. We have to start it now. Yeah. Just two more things. I want to tell our Sri Lankan friend, Hindutva has transgressed the borders of India. When we had Ram Navami violence in Bihar, where they burnt up a 110-year-old library in Bihar Sharif, is the most traumatizing thought to see that old texts in that library, 110-year-old madarsa and a library which had books 1,000 years old, manuscripts and sheets of paper made by a woman. Next day, there was violence, Ram Navami violence in Nepal. along the border with Bihar. We are seeing that when one senator in California brought in the bill to make caste, anybody perpetuating using caste as a crime, to pass it in the California Senate. As a senator, she proposed the bill. There were rallies against her, that's okay, it's a democratic right to take out a rally. But the kind of hate mails she has received, unbelievable. So Hindutva, along with all other right-wing consolidations, Howdy Modi, which Trump, making America great once again, these are all slogans to consolidate the supremacists, the white supremacists there, and it's happening globally. So Hindutva is definitely one force which is causing this sort of unrest globally, and things are going to get worse. So if they've reached the Tamils and perpetuating, it's bound to be. Maybe shakhas are happening. With my own eyes, I saw an RSS shakha in Sunnyvale in the Bay Area of US. I was shocked. But yes, I saw a shakha, an RSS shakha happening there. The whatever Hindu for Americans is a completely right-wing ideological group, and it's very much there. So friends, remember, the fascists came into South Asia. We saw the expression through many ways, but 1948, when Gandhi was murdered, that was a complete Hindutva supremacist, fascist, lots killing. We saw 51 Liaquat Ali, the day in Rawalpindi, in a public place he announced that we're going to get a democratic constitution. He was killed by Islamists. Similarly, Bandara Naike was killed by Buddhists. So we have an old history of fascists trying to kill democracy and democratic rulers. So we have to deal with it at the South Asian level also. And it's not something that, that is just left to India. But India is so huge that it can destroy the entire region with its Hindutva. So we have to be careful. Every nation has to be very, very careful. Regarding RSS as registered, PUCL is unregistered. How does it matter? Movements don't have to be registered. People's voices don't have to have a registration. RSS need not be registered, but all its NGOs are registered. They get one of the largest. We were told the church-based institutions get the largest amount of money through FCRA, but now we know that the church-based are second. The largest are the RSS-based institutions. Yeah. In Jaipur, just before I came here, the RSS charitable organizations, Seva Bharti, was having a huge program in the RSS University. And you know what the first statement made by Mohan Bhagat was? It wasn't the Christian missionaries who did charities in India. It's our missionaries who've done more charities. I mean, why did he have to even say that? Even through their charities, of course, we know those are not charities at all. The money comes through charity. In the name of COVID, Seva Bharti got in unaccounted money. In the name of schools, they bring in unaccounted money. So Kavita, friends, I've ended here that the battle is very long, it's going to be a long haul, but please start it. That's the whole idea.
Thank you, Kavita ji. Kavita ji has challenged us in many ways. We thank her. But the most important thing, I think, is the passion with which she shares and the conviction with which she shares. And that passion and the conviction, I think, will show us the way ahead. I invite Father Sushil to thank her.
Therefore, it's time to thank Ms. Kavita Srivastava for giving her time and especially challenging all of us, seeing the current political scenario of our country that poses question to everyone. So it's up to thank her. I call upon Father Stanislas. Father Stanislas, I call. May I request you to come forward to thank and honor. Yeah. Kindly give a good hand. I will call Father Jesuit. Yeah, thank you, Father Stanis. Thank you very much. Yeah. And now I especially thank Father Tom Kaula for chairing the session, and also we'd like to thank him and honor him. So, Father Jesuit. Okay, thank you, Father Geras, and thank you, both of you. Now, I have a few things to announce. Someone has dropped his credit card. I'll just check the name. Leos Hasapurti. So you can collect from me. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, no, just we shall announce now.
Please write down these questions for group discussion.
No. Okay, meanwhile, I'll announce the groups. We shall go according to the, okay, we have divided groups into 6. So I'll read out the groups and also the place where they will go after the tea. First group is Kerala, Chennai, and Andhra. Team leader will be Emmanuel Cohen, and then D. Pratap will be the secretary. They will remain in this hall. Okay, and then the second group is Karnataka, Madurai, and Sri Lanka. Benny is the leader and Ambrose the secretary. Group number 3, Pune, Goa, Mumbai, and Gujarat. Simon Pandanis is the leader and Ramesh Tandvi the secretary. Fourth group, Ajit. Third group will, second group and first and second group will stay back in the hall. And then third group will go to TV room. That's the first TV room.